How's it going, guys? It's Mr. Lone Wolf, and finally I got the Fleetstar F2070A review. We'll just call it Fleetstar. Yeah, I've been giving it a good old test. We'll see how it goes. We'll get stuck into it. So first up is the engine. Both the two bottom ones basically have the same power to weight. They don't seem to change any of the stats, but I'm going for the bottom one. At least it's S on the stats, it's power to weight, which is nice. I'm going for the high range gearbox. As for the suspension, it does actually raise it like a little bit, not a crazy amount, but a few of the trucks that barely makes any difference, whereas that one it does a bit. As for the wheels, the biggest ones are like 45-inch, which it's not the worst, but yeah, it's definitely. I mean, the Tager's got 51. The Dolphin's sort of a bigger truck anyway, but that's got 50s, I think. But yeah, I believe the Steptoe had 43, so it's not the worst. The Winch obviously got the advanced medium. The diff lock, I believe it just had on anyway. I don't even think I could unequip it. The spare tyre is on the chassis, and again, I remove that usually because I don't really like it being there. As for the Snorkel, it's not all the way to the roof, but it's about halfway. Obviously, we'll give it a water test later on. You've got all-wheel drive, like rear-wheel drive, engageable all-wheel drive. It actually does change the axle and everything. The only one that doesn't is the GMC at the minute, because they obviously just kind of added it as a bit of an after thing when they decided to add it. Maybe they'll mod it to have a proper front axle soon. As for all the attachments you can have about everything except for the seismic module vibrator thing. You can have a crane, a sideboard, and a trailer as well, which is nice. It's like there is a few trucks where you can do that, but not too many. The fenders I can't take off. I wish I could, but it's not letting me do it. As for the rooftop, there's only that beacon you can put on top in the middle. There's no fog lights or anything, which is not the end of the world, because especially that you can just change to daytime without any penalty, but still. As for the bumpers, that's the stock one, which I believe is the best. However, that one is a tiny little bit worse, but it's got some fog lights on. That's a lot worse, and that is basically the same as the stock, but lower. Like, it pretty much sits at the same place, yeah, just lower. So you can see the difference between them two. That one is definitely a tiny bit lower, even though it's also sloped a bit, but it's got two fog lights on the front, which I tested out. I don't know, I'll show you in a minute, but I'm not sure if it does make a whole lot of difference. It seems when you've got fog lights, it makes the colour of the light more kind of pure white than more of a yellow tinge to it. But anyway, as for all the add-ons and stuff, you've got things like cabin protectors, horns, the sun visors, nothing crazy really. And then as for exhaust, I had actually had the heat shielded one, those ones on the whole time. However, I just noticed that the stock one is only on one side of the cab, and it's now not blocking my view behind me for the interior view. So I stuck the stock one back on, but I do like the heat shield ones. And then all the alloys, you got pretty much, I believe, every one it gives you the option of having. And then as for colours, looks pretty nice in black. I'm not too sure about grey. It looks quite nice in white. It reminds me a bit like the Lodestar though at that point, and that looked quite nice in white. It shows off like the arches and that very well. That colour was alright, like especially for the age of the truck. I like the red and black the most. I do like that, but I wish the blue was a bit more vibrant. The same with that, I like it, but I wish the green was a little bit more vibrant. And then that, yeah, it's just the choice between those two. I'd rather like the brighter red. That just looks sort of, yeah, a little bit more faded and old. So yeah, we'll take a look outside and have a little check around the base. I still like the look of it. I do like the old school trucks on this game. As for the rear and that, I can't take the mud flaps off, but at least they sit quite nice and high. And then inside looks like a pretty typical sort of old school American cab, I suppose. I like that the mirror's pretty decently sized, and I can see very well out the back. The only thing is, again, those mud flap or mud guards, I believe that's what I can see in the mirror, not the actual tyre. The same with that side. But when I am looking forward, I could still see the corner, but again, with them mud flaps or guards there, it's, yeah. I can see the whole garage door behind me though. I can still see my wheels like under the mud flap, so if I wanted to know what they were doing, I'd be able to. As for the horn, not bad. I'd say, yeah, it's alright. It'll do. It's not a terrible one. And then as for the revs, I was pretty glad that it climbs pretty quick. Goes to about 2,500, I believe it was. And yeah, it gets there nicely, which is certainly what I prefer. That's what she said. To get it in somewhere. Yeah, so we'll look at the trailer. Also, when you're pulling off, like, obviously, high-range gearbox, it's quite nice when you stick it in high, and then sometimes I just stick it back in auto. All the trailers, though, they actually sit pretty nice and high, especially for a truck that is basically parked outside this garage when you first find it. Even with that saddle high trailer, it's only really like the rubber of the tyres, and even the alloys of the trailer don't reach the floor. So, yeah, that's pretty decent ground clearance, to be fair. And then just a quick one, like I say, the crane, the sideboard, and the trailer, and I did a tighter turn as I can. It actually makes the corner, or the cornering, even tighter when you've got the trailer on. But yeah, you can have all three, so it's a nice option to have. So going along there, it slows down a bit in auto, but most of them do really. I just stick it in high range, and it is pulling along just fine across there. And at first, going across here, it was like, well, it's looking alright. It was skipping along in high, but then by now it sort of got bogged down. You can tell once the water starts spraying off the back tyres that it's basically gone to a wheel spin, and it's pretty doubtful it's going to get itself out of it. Not that it matters though, I wasn't struggling over here. I went to auto. I mean, low range with the diffs on. I believe I tried it quickly, and it's fine. It's just, yeah, I'd rather try and find the quickest way across. Like, low range diffs on is a last resort, so to speak, and this was actually doing pretty nicely in auto. And even when I put it in high, then it doesn't. It's possible to stall it in high, as it is practically everything, but it's definitely on the nicer end of like not stalling when you put it in high. You can be going pretty slow and put it in high, and it'll either wheel spin or get going. Like, and yeah, flying down there, nailed one tree. I hit a few trees tonight. Nailing one, it's pretty decent at and consistent. Any more than that, I don't know really. Well, again, we'll see a little bit later. But yeah, that tree test that's always been there, one tree. But I can live with that, because if I ever go a bit wide on the road and I might hit one tree, if I can knock one down without making my cargo go flying. See, look, I was looking at the speedo there. When I said this yesterday, that in low range it feels like very low revs. It's going up a little bit more there as I was coming out, but it was sat at about 800 to 1000 RPM, and it idles at about 550, and it redline, or the game limits it anyway, at 2.5. So yeah, you've only got like a third of your engine really, and I don't know how much power that's given you at a third. Obviously there does seem to be like a bit of a grip benefit as soon as you go into the low range anyway, just kind of with the mechanics of the game. But yeah, personally I would like a bit more revs in the low range. And going along over bumps, to be honest, as you can see, the suspension's barely damaged on the little dials at the bottom. Like, it never really was an issue tonight. I'll show you something later on, but yeah, like, as far as just going over rocks when I was in the high range and all sorts, I took the odd one damage, but it was nothing where, yeah, it was getting out of hand or anything. When I hit that anti-terrorist barricade, that certainly nailed me a little bit, but they sort of do really. I mean, as somebody said, they've sort of upped them, and it's a bit over the top. So I was looking at the Rev Ranges again. Like, if you go in slow enough, because the speed cap hasn't been reached, it does feed a bit more revs in. But again, you're talking about 800 to 1000 in just low range. And I did try the off-road gearbox. The, what was it? Low was about 700 or 800 as well. Medium low was about 800 to 1000, and then high low was about 1000 to 1500 depending on your speed. So it definitely was a bit better. The only reasons why I prefer the high range is it was actually quite nice in auto, even off-road. So there's like putting the lights on. That was with the bumper on that had the fog lights. That's without the fog lights. And as you can see, I spliced them together now, and it was like, when I was looking myself, I was like, it's not. As you can see though, it changed like the colour of the light basically. It was more yellowy, like old school headlights, and then the fog lights sort of, I suppose, look like more modern LED, just very pure white. So as I say, I had to have a little go. I did try this the other week when I did this video. I can't remember if I kept this one in the video or not, but either way, I couldn't resist. I was about to leave this map, and I was like, hang on a minute, something doesn't feel right. See, I'm trying to grow some cargo, and these goddamn trees are nicking my sunlight. So on this way, I knocked 6 over, and then I kind of got caught up on the what was left over of the trees, and then going this way, it's like, well, it's slowing me down every time, but then it was just getting its speed back. But now I was like, hang on a minute, go on, one more, yes, what a goddamn beauty. Engine's in the red, but I think it took all 8 down in that row, which is pretty decent, to be honest. And I'd say it's a better benchmark than the original tree test. I mean, I was having too much fun, did a little wheel spin on that, going for the big one, bam. I mean, we rocked it a bit. It was about as good as you can expect. I'll take it. So you're going along here. Normally I put it in high now, and I'll be honest, I forgot. However, you can see how well it was doing. Once you get to this bit, it sort of officially becomes deep snow, and it slows down for practically everything anyway. So I got my front wheels over there, and I didn't catch the fuel tanks, which was nice. At least I do like at the minute, you can see the mud guards are definitely above where the barrier is, so that's not the issue. Obviously low range diffs on is the best grip wise really, but because the revs are very low, it just didn't quite have the guts to climb over there, and I don't think it's necessarily a lack of power, it's a lack of accessible rev range power. So it's sort of not the truck itself, but it's been artificially limited. I'd say to a degree though, it does feel like a few harsh limitations on this. Not many, that'd be the main one. And you can kind of, or I suspect, it was too much of a capable truck if they let it go too much higher kind of thing, and obviously they had to pick something to be an early game truck. Personally, if it was me, just straight off the bat, I'd probably swap this with the M916 as the early game truck, since it's punished on fuel. I don't know though, because this isn't that punished on fuel, and I suppose that's not a bad thing when you're just starting the game and like you don't need every restriction and mechanic hitting you all at once. You kind of want to, yeah, get a bit used to it. As for going over this barrier, again it was just the rear tyres were not having it, so in the end I did a winch and it got over pretty easy, but yeah, it just, on it under its own steam with that low rev range, it was having none of it. As for going it through here though, again I'm still in auto, which is nice because I like more options. Like, I don't mind going into low if I have to, but just if I had the choice. Obviously that's why I generally prefer trucks that have got the diffs always on, because then effectively first gear auto becomes like high-low. Whereas this, every time I want to stay in auto I've not got the diffs, but for whatever reason, possibly because it's low revving, so it's kind of geared nearer towards the low range anyway. But yeah, even with the diffs off, it doesn't really wheel spin just one wheel really fast. It's kind of, I suppose, got that blend of slow enough that it still grips along a bit. I don't know how to explain it, but I think you'll know what I mean if you've played the game. Yeah, going up there, I'd say one of its biggest problems is, say, between the front tyres and the rear bank of tyres, there's quite, it doesn't sit quite high enough. That's where, say, like 48, 50-inch tyres would be nice. However, if you look at the two rear tyres, you couldn't really fit bigger tyres on it. You'd have to move the axles further apart. So the steering there, I had to line it up twice, or probably that was the third time, because I kept hitting that tree. And yeah, now my arse was caught on the wall, but we're good, we got out of it luckily. Yeah, as for the steering, it's not the worst in game, but I don't know, it might be that it's a bit delayed. Once you got full lock, it's quite a nice deep steering angle. Yeah, it's just, I don't know if it's a bit delayed or what, but something feels a little bit iffy about it. And yeah, if you drove it a lot, I reckon you'd get used to it, but I also reckon then if you jumped into another vehicle, you'd be a bit like, whoop, on that one for a minute or two while you kind of get back to being used to like more settled steering, shall we say. Going through the trees, it started struggling at first. As we're looking at them now, that tree on the left seems a bit more difficult with its branches, so I kind of sort of scooted over to the right as we're looking, but the left as I was driving. And yeah, made it through though, which again isn't bad because it's an early game truck. It certainly doesn't cost anything like the late game trucks or some of the expensive stuff, so I wouldn't say I had the bar set amazingly high for it, but yeah, so far it's been doing pretty nicely. Cargo test, made that corner very nicely. I didn't even really let off the accelerator, so I probably could have made a tighter corner if I really wanted to, but point being, there's once you full lock, yeah, that aspect of the steering is pretty decent. Can't really fault it. See there though, getting a bit squirrely. I think even though I've got the steering mode on, or the steering wheel mode that's auto centering, maybe it's that's a bit delayed as well, so once you've steered into something and let go, it doesn't just snap back immediately. I don't know, but it's yeah, not quite what I'd choose anyway. There's certainly other vehicles where the steering is a lot nicer. And then going through it, I'll be honest, I actually brought a 4-slot ramped trailer as well, and I might make a separate video because I can pretty much show you that there's something not right with the ramped 4-slot. But I'll see, like, if not, I'll put it in a video soon either way, but I might actually make a video to just let people know that there is something amiss with it. But yeah, low range diffs on. I mean, it's not very fast, again, because of the low revs. I mean, say if you're talking 800 RPM, it's I don't know if the mechanics or how it works in this game are like this, but if it's 800 RPM on a 45-inch wheel, it's going to be slower than 1500 RPM on a 50-inch wheel, I think. I assume. I'm hoping, now I've said it. But yeah, well, yeah, that's what I believe anyway, so it sort of makes sense that it's a bit sluggish, as well that it's an early game truck. I suppose they don't want it just flying across, like, dominating the map speed-wise too much. But made that corner nice. I mean, it got through there with no help. Didn't need any winches or anything like that. It wasn't even really anywhere where I got stuck and I kind of had to wriggle around to get through there. So, yeah, pretty decent to be fair. Can't really knock it anyway. Yeah, next up, water test. Goes a little bit deeper there, but now we're back into the shallow stuff. Stuck it in the high range now, and yeah, like most of the other trucks really. I mean, it's maintaining its speed in the high range. See, the high range goes up to more like, I believe it was like 2,000, but it might even go a bit more if you weren't reaching like the speed cap by then. So it sits wide enough if it was practically the width of going through that gap, so yeah, which isn't a bad thing. It helps with rolling really. The wider the base of your truck sits, the better. Or mostly, unless they've really fiddled with the weight mechanics of it. Yeah, I cut a bit out there because I got caught on a tree branch, and I wouldn't necessarily... I'm not saying this is great for ramming through trees, but one of those tree branches on that tree that was on the left is ridiculous. I've got all sorts of, like, very high-powered vehicles stuck on this tree branch, just on the absolute corner of it as well. And yeah, that tree branch don't fuck around. But yeah, once I got past that, I mean, the snow going through that path, like, the steering was still quick enough to sort of keep up with me. The horizon, like, the bonnet's not too much in the way to it. It'd be better if it wasn't there, but it's not, like, not anything that bad. It's about on the horizon. Looking around, though, good views all around, if I'm honest. Even looking out the back, I can see what my tyres are doing. It's like, god damn. Badger came out of nowhere. It was definitely not my fault. But going along here, though, I mean, I was trying auto, high. I could try low range, but I just know it's going to be slower than this, so why would I do such a thing? I was still able to see where that rock is, especially because the bonnet kind of narrows out at either corner. Again, it's the bottom left-hand corner of the windscreen is quite nice and handy. But at least if that bonnet was completely square, that would hog pretty much all that bottom left corner, so I'm glad it doesn't. Going through there as well, I mean, it didn't clip the bumper. I did try it another time as well, and I didn't clip the bumper again. Like, especially with the stock bumper on. It's one of them. It's a little bit like the GMC 9500, where the front wheels are very close to the front of the truck, really. So there's not really any nose overhanging. And even going through there, like, it was still doing rooster tails and wheel spinning, but I kept it in high for, I believe, all of it, if not most of it, and it didn't completely just stop and wheel spin, which is nice. Some trucks do, even if they're pretty powerful and whatever. Some can just, yeah, they'll sit on the spot and wheel spin, which is of not much use. And going across this rock bridge, it gets up the lips, like the edges of those rocks pretty nicely, which is all I'd really sort of expect from it. So even with a 45-inch tyre, I mean, 45-inch tyres are not the worst. It's just, yeah, if I had the choice, I'd obviously. But the step toe as well, I believe that had, like, was it 43-inch tyres, and that did surprisingly well for something that has tyres that small on it. But yeah, if I had to, I'd drive over that rock bridge again in it. I'd trust it on a mission, so to speak. And then once we get here, though, it's in deep snow. I'm still in auto at the minute, so I just wanted to see how it was doing. You can hear from the engine, as and when I change from low range to auto, that I've clearly got more access to the rev range in auto. So, and that possibly is why I believe I still quite like just sitting it in auto in this truck instead of even bothering with low range, because, yeah, having access to that rev range is more important to me than, like, say, I can do this, I can stick it in low range with the diffs on. In fact, I'd even say the fuel usage goes down when you're in low range with the diffs on. And I suppose in this one the fuel's probably pretty good because it sits at such a low rev range. So yeah, I'm certainly not saying don't use low range, but it is still pretty nice in auto, so that's a sort of a good thing for the truck, really. So I started to tip into that dip at the right, and that's where the TUZ16 basically, like, tipped over on itself because it doesn't have a very long chassis or anything to counter it. And I mean, it was a bit slow through here. I'm certainly, again, when I'm saying things that are sort of good and bad about this, I'm viewing it from the perspective of I got it when I found the Black River garage, so yeah, I'm not. Well, I mean, I'm still gonna say compare it to, like, the off-road Dolphin in terms of what I'd use more often than not, but at the same time, I mean, it doesn't cost the same as a Voron or a Freightliner or all stuff like that, or a Dolphin. It certainly doesn't cost what, like, the Derry and stuff does. I mean, going through the mud along the left-hand edge, it was fine, and I reckon it would have just drove through just fine. But once I drove into the middle here and got into, like, particularly where it's already, like, you can see pools of water already there, yeah, it basically just got stuck. It was, like, I suppose between 45-inch tyres, the bumper clearance is all pretty decent, I'd say, so it's just, I suppose, the fuel tanks are drained. Yeah, it wasn't liking it, and it was just wheel spinning rather than actually getting through there, so I had to use the winch in the end. I've just got a habit of hitting L1 trying to make it jump through the gears. So yeah, going through it, I mean, I wouldn't say that great, but it's not the worst through there. If you can skip along the edge, it's kind of, it'd get you by, but I certainly wouldn't vote for this truck if I had to go through there. So yeah, next up the mountain, going up here again. I'm still in auto because it's doing pretty nice. But here is where stuff like the ANK and the Royal tipped, and a few others, but I have to say the sort of the way it's quite planted on the floor. Again, it's not the best in the game, but it's pretty good, I would say. Even with the nose test as well, I went for a fairly harsh one, and yeah, I had no troubles really. I mean, like I say, overall I can say so far, I can obviously tell it's not the best truck in the game, or I'd say even close, but I can definitely see why a lot of people like it, especially the fact that it's an early game truck. I drove it for a little bit, and I appreciate I've got it fully upgraded now. When you get it, it's not, but every truck review I've done is fully upgraded. Like, that's what you sort of want to aim for with every truck anyway, so... I mean, as you can see here, it's not just tipping straight away. I had to kind of keep, you know, seesawing backwards and forwards, getting the nose end a bit further down the mountain, so it was tilting enough to go. In the end, as quite a lot do, I ended up against that tree, which it just tends to be the way a truck rolls. I went to jump over there. Did alright jumping over there. Would have got the loaf over, but I forgot to take it out of high gear. So instead of driving, I sort of, yeah, stopped and stalled. But anyway, pretty easy. I didn't even winch it over in the end. I think I just rammed it with a Taiga and it rolled back onto its wheels. But like going round here where I turn round for this White Western Star hill, it didn't even remotely feel like it was going to tip to the left there. So yeah, it is definitely like pretty nicely up there as far as trucks that don't tip go. It's I was pretty happy with that, to be honest. Never really had me worried all night. Then going up here, as I sort of bridge over that, I don't know, there is quite a lot of weight in the back of this one as opposed to the front. Well, I don't know really when you're driving, you'll see a bit later, but once I sort of peaked over that hill, I think I lost a bit of my front grip and I started slipping a little bit before some other trucks, but once I put it into low range diffs on and I scooted over to the left, I still got up there with pretty much no issues. But I believe that can play a factor in the end, that once your front comes off, yeah, you're losing a certain percentage of your grip and everything. So it rolled there where most of them do, but as I was rolling down, I mean, yeah, I'd say more times than not it tries to return to its wheels. Obviously the exhaust can make some difference, so if I had the twin heat shield ones on that are both sticking out either side, as you're rolling, like, yeah, they're not just invisible and clip through everything, so I mean, it's hard to say which one is better or not, it depends on the roll, but I just thought I'd mention it, they do affect it. So I made it over that hill. I mean, I stopped there like, well, I think it's not that often I don't roll something by now, so I'll just have to stare at the truck. As you can see, I've already burst a wheel. I hit it on a lamp post. But going through here, I believe it's the wheel you can see that's under the mudguard now. And especially once I went to low range diffs on, I mean, it's certainly got quite a lot of power, or enough to where, yeah, going along in situations like that, it was still going just fine. I had the loaf being towed behind me as well. But I already knew, this is why I did leave this trailer here a little while ago. See, whatever I just hit then completely deleted me, and I'll get onto that soon. But basically, I've got a maintenance trailer just halfway up the mountain, on like to the left of screen, I suppose. So I just went and attached that quickly, repaired myself, and then came back. Going down that bit of quarry, I suppose it was just fine. Like, the trailer didn't tip, it didn't try and take me with it or anything. I believe it might have clipped its nose a bit, but if not, when we come down, it is possible to clip your nose if you have the right sort of impact angle. And to be honest, by the time I got here, it was pretty slow. This is where it's not that weighty, really, to be honest. Like, it is a pretty light truck, and not having any weight or a lot over the front of the vehicle as well was that's why I stopped when I was putting those bits of cargo in. I wouldn't say it made much difference, but I was thinking, a bit like it did with the step tow, maybe once I've got some weight in the trailer it'd help. And I don't know whether it did or not, but I wouldn't say it particularly made it worse, considering I've just added quite a lot of weight and cargo. But yeah, it wasn't the most comfortable through here, but it could kind of, yeah, you'd get by. Like, I'd carry on completing it before I just think, ah, sod this, recover and bring something else. But then going up here, and already, as you can see, I'm steering left the whole time, the nose starts to pivot up, even though the saddle low kind of attaches between the two rear axles. Especially once I'm on an angle now, as you can see, if you draw a line straight down the screen, like the saddle low is kind of now over the rear wheels and it's making it pivot like that. I was like, oh, god damn. That was not what I planned to do. Of course. I mean, goddamn horse of a vehicle, get yourself a loaf. Saves the day every goddamn time. So the trailers, or I don't know if any other people are, I'm sure somebody's had this where the trailer gets kind of caught up when it's wrapped completely around. So, attempt number 2. I mean, it was looking like it was thinking about tipping then, but it didn't, so yeah, got this far out, and I was like, well, that's looking pretty good. That's actually quite nice and comfortable up the first quarry hill. Dragging its arse on the floor a bit. The back bit of ladder frame chassis behind the rear wheels does stick out quite far. That's probably one of the reasons why you can have a crane, sideboard and trailer. As you can see though, the front started to wheelie again. I couldn't help it seesawing round. So I tried to line it up, tried to go again, it was just doing the same thing. Just making my front end jump over to the left. So now I was trying to line it up. So I thought, right, I'll put it in reverse, which I don't normally do. For some reason, completely forgot I just put it in reverse. Hit the accelerator, expecting to go forward. Shot backwards down the hill. So that was my fault. But I still wasn't impressed by this point. I mean, of course, goddamn professional. Get yourself a loaf. You see? Wasn't just luck. Loaf doesn't deal in luck. So it started going up. I straightened up because I thought, oh, it's going alright, and then it suddenly flicked violently, tipped. I winched the loaf there, but it was once the Fleetstar got past like 90 degrees, it stalled the engine and just disconnected my winch. However, I did leave that bit in to show you. Sometimes deleting the cargo, if you've rolled, you might be able to get out of it. I've done that before on this hill, and yeah, that's what I went for. So I was turning this time like, oh hell no. Fool me once, shame on you, but you ain't doing it twice. So I got myself a goddamn horse of a vehicle. I mean, like I say, look at him, just a professional. Sitting there as a mobile winch point. So at this point, I drove up to the first part of the hill, moved the loaf to the top. And as you can see, I keep disconnecting it, because I don't necessarily think I need the loaf to pull me up the hill, but I need something to winch to stop my nose from seesawing round to the left. I mean, there, did it pretty violently. I stuck the winch on there, and that possibly could have tipped as well if I didn't. Which, yeah, like I said, it's a bit of a shame. I was kind of umming and ahhing. I could balance a loaf on the front of it to weigh it down, but I came to the conclusion that, realistically, just bring a loaf with you, even if you're just towing it behind you or whatever, and then when you need to, stick the loaf there. You got a mobile winch point. Stick the loaf everywhere. Mobile winch points for all. It did actually get up there in the end, and it didn't tip as well. I was kind of ready to try and stick a winch on that telegraph pole, because I really didn't fancy going back and getting more concrete slabs for the 4th or 5th time. But yeah, it got through there. I mean, I'm not going to give it a full pass because I had to winch to the loaf to keep my nose down, but power-wise, I believe it would have got up there. Now, though, I mean, I didn't have a high... In fact, I'd almost be more annoyed if it did make it up here, because it'd kind of be like, well, what does that say about a lot of the other more expensive later game trucks? it's fair to say the rear tyres, where most of the weight was pressing, they've just locked up. The ones just in front of it were able to spin because there just wasn't that much weight on it. But yeah, it was having none of it. So I started to winch it up with the loaf. But again, I wasn't trying to drag it up at this point. I was just trying to keep the nose down and straight enough to see if I could mostly get up there under my own steam. Long story short, I let go of the winch. It did a big fat wheelie and I rolled down the hill. And now I am just winching it up with a loaf. I'm not messing around, not trying to get it up under its own steam. That's what she said. So what I was trying to do now is just winch to one of them trees. Because what I'd normally like to do is say I could put the handbrake on, switch to the loaf, move the loaf a bit forward, winch this from the loaf. But because this thing just tips up when you put the handbrake on and tries to do a wheelie, yeah, I needed to stay in this preferably, but again the loaf got it at least high enough to where I could reach one of them trees. And turn it down here, thought about it, nearly tipped over to the right. Apologies, a little glitch there, but the cargo, at least one of them anyway, disconnected. It might have been both, but probably, I don't know. No, I reckon just one of them. Oh, I don't know. As you can see there though, I did clip my nose and stuff, so it's doable. Like, it's not the biggest clearance in the world, but for the average situation, I mean, I am hoofing it down a quarry hill with a trailer and so on, so I wasn't expecting miracles. I mean, look at that, I was like, god damn, it was a meaty rock, we'll give it that. Yeah, you could already hear from the engine just completely like, there's just not enough revs or anything. I knew it wouldn't get up here. It was having none of it. And just for the fun of it, because I can, I flew a loaf off a cliff. I mean, look at him. Bites down. He knows what he's doing, goes for another roll. It's all part of the plan. And we're off. I mean, did the sun just come out? Right, this is what I wanted to say with the suspension. I just hit it there and I did 93 damage or whatever. But then I looked at the dials at the bottom and I was like, how the hell's that half gone already? So I actually looked at the damage. Basically, the suspension has only got 170 health, which I think is pretty low. And the fuel tank only had 50 health, which I would say is not great. I've never really looked, never really noticed for. That's probably, in fact, I could say that's the first time I've ever intentionally looked at the damage that way to see the numbers. Normally I just go by, yeah, like the little sort of diagrams in the bottom corner. As for on the ice though, because it doesn't weigh a hell of a lot, it was doing like not too bad considering. I mean, it didn't absolutely just punch through the ice instantly, which is still possible, I might add. But with one side of the tyres out, like, it's still gripping along, but once I punch through, it gets worse. I did notice something that was weird. If you look at my ladder frame chassis, those two metal bars between where the fuel tanks are, look at the one nearest to the camera. About now it starts twisting a bit and going like darker, and you see it just pop up there. Like, it's weird. I'll show you in slow motion in a second. I don't know if it means anything. The only thing I did think though is I kind of say the ice is a bit glitchy and grips onto you, and it's kind of like it made that bar in the ladder frame chassis go weird. So I'll show you the slow motion now. As you can see, I had like, it was kind of uniform and white over the top, not white, but it was kind of like lighter coloured. Now it's gone dark and started twisting, and there, look, it like pops up out of the ladder frame, or the chassis, should I say. Yeah, I don't know, it's like it caught on some ice and got a bit glitched and weird. There was a big chunk of ice that was sat in front of the fuel tank, and that's the thing, I do enjoy the ice, but it locks you in place so much. Like someone said the other day, was like, oh, just go round the ice, and it's like, yeah, but that's kind of my point, that it's fun, but it's a little bit too, and like, restrictive to where, yeah, the best option is to go around the ice, and it's kind of a shame. I like to risk it, but if I'm honest, it doesn't pay off very often. As you can see though, it doesn't weigh a hell of a lot, and it is spreading its weight enough, considering it's only got the, like, chained on. There isn't like some gigantic custom muds for it or anything. So yeah, overall, I mean, that's not bad as far as the ice goes, especially that, like I say, it hasn't got some custom wide muds. So on a speed test, I mean, it's not bad. It's not the fastest truck, but I'd be happy ticking along at that speed. Go for a good old jump. I mean, it cleared a pretty decent distance off there, so it can't be that slow. I was looking now like, something seems a bit suspicious to me. I have to send in the dolphin to investigate. I mean, nailed it. Goddamn nailed it. First time. It was a little submarine snorkel. Didn't even take engine damage. Farts out his ass. Scares some fish. Winch out the Fleetstar. Oh shit. Nearly damaged my naturally occurring cargo. But we're all good. So yeah, I recovered it, but I was like, well, it does need repairing a bit. So sent this little beast in, started getting twitchy. Alright. It's time to Jeff Special, you bitch. See how you like them apples. Tried to go for a repair again mid-air, but I'm not quick enough at it at the minute. I'm gonna have to practice. I mean, landed it. I did use a bit of winch. See, these trailers, I'll be honest, have came in handy as winch points more often than you would like to think. Yeah, anyway, fixed the Fleetstar. Still something not right though. Send in Dolphin and Loaf just to make double sure. I mean, look at him, he's goddamn professional. He's already checked the water, temperature, the local geological conditions. He knows what he's doing. See, he knew it was good to land. That's right. That's why you get yourself a Loaf. But everything seems good here. I mean, he's basically a seahorse. Goes through the water like it's not even there. Just had to be sure. So, okay. Good point, I'm sure. Glad we covered that. So, going to go for a kind of snorkel limit test. Not quite the drowning test yet. I mean, so far it's going into the water nicely enough. And here comes the snorkel. Like I say, it's not up to the roof, so I knew it wasn't going to get all the way. I mean, yeah, about there it was getting 2 damage, so probably I went back a bit now, and then it started saying 1 after a while, so somewhere between there and there. Which, I mean, is enough for pretty much every situation you're going to come across, unless you go flying off this cliff and into the sea. I mean, even though it theoretically drowns before some vehicles, the fact that it still drove nicely up to that point is good. So going along here, I mean, damage starts 23, 24. 24 is my lucky number. And then, I mean, what a goddamn beast. It did pretty well. It was one of only few vehicles, really, that actually made it over here comfortably, and that was first try as well. I didn't even know it was going to do it. It was just, as soon as it started floating, turned the camera around, I saw my prize and I went for it. And we made it. Even going up here, I mean, it gets up this hill as well. Low range diffs on. Like I said, it's not the fastest thing, but I mean, for most things, it does do the job slowly, but it gets there. Even took a bit of engine damage as well, but I think it only just went into the red anyway. But yeah, it didn't try and stall once or anything like that. I was driving around this island, didn't really know what else to do, so I flung it off the mountain or cliff. What a goddamn beast, can't really ask for any more than that. Pinned the cargo, we win. And then since it made it over here, I figured I'd give it a little drive up the river. Some kind of euphemism, that's definitely what she said. And yeah, I wanted to see how down. I mean, like I say, it made it over here. It deserves it. It earned it. The water is a bit odd as you drive up here. It kind of... it's like above ground more than it should be. But still fought its way through. It got up here. And yeah, I mean, overall you can see there it was a bit odd just behind the truck. Yeah, I mean, overall I think it's done pretty well, all things considered, especially that it was an early game truck. I drove all the way to the top of the river. You end up, there's just trees blocking it, really. So yeah, in conclusion, I don't think it's that bad. I actually don't. I mean, now I've got access to basically everything. I'm not exactly going to say, oh, I'll be jumping in it every 5 minutes, because I won't, but I can certainly see the appeal of it, and if and when I do another playthrough of the game, I'll certainly give it more of a chance than I did last time. I mean, after about a day or so, I bought the Navistar, and I enjoyed that more anyway, and I just put all my money into that, really, so I didn't really have enough left over to upgrade this as well. But yeah, pretty happy with it, all things considered. And there's a lot of things it did pretty comfortably. I mean, it did pretty well in the quarry. The deep mud, it really didn't like that too much, but in the snow it was alright. Going up the mountains, it's quite nice for not tipping and stuff. So yeah, it's probably worth keeping, to be honest, especially that you get it so early. I mean, 68 grand fully upgraded, that'd be like mid-50s if I took the winch off. I mean, you look there, it's 30 grand, and you find like you get given it anyway. GMC is 26, so it's a little bit dearer than GMC, but all-wheel drive in that is probably more accessible. Like, you'd have to get Lake Coved or whatever for the GMC all-wheel drive. So yeah, that'd be my conclusion. Keep it if you find it. I mean, if you're really desperate for the money, sell whatever you like. But yeah, it's definitely worth keeping it. I'd rather sell the GMC without all-wheel drive than this. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.